Goalies, arguably the most important position in all of hockey. Now, some people feel like you can plug and play any guy at this position, but I feel differently. Goalies are the backbone to any great organization, and if you look back at almost any Stanley Cup champion, you'll see that they have a great guy between the pipes leading the way. So today, I'll be talking about the top 10 active goalies heading into the 2024-25 NHL season. Now, let me preface this video by saying this isn't going to solely be based on performances from the 2023 season. While I do feel like some guys had great years and will translate into future seasons, I do feel like there are other players who have shown me over a longer course that they belong on this type of list, whether they're going to have a bounce back season or have just been a bit consistent throughout the past 5 years or so. So if you guys have been liking the content lately and you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that now. Let you guys know whenever I post new content like this, and let's get right into this one. At number 10 on my list, maybe a little bit of an older guy at this point in his career, but he's about to get a fresh start in New Jersey. Jacob Markstrom has been pretty much one of the more consistent goalies over the past decade and a half. This guy has been a top-notch starter playing for Vancouver, Calgary, and now in his third stint with the New Jersey Devils. While he was playing on a pretty lackluster Calgary Flames team last year, I think a lot of people have basically counted him out from the top 10, but I feel differently. Markstrom playing on a Calgary team that really has no defense put up a .905 save percentage and a 2.78 goals against average with 23 wins in 48 games played. Again, these numbers aren't all that amazing, but if you look at the goals against average based on what people probably expected for the Calgary Flames this year, I feel like Markstrom pretty much stood on his head as one of their better players. Take Markstrom out of the equation, and I feel like the Calgary Flames would have had a much higher lottery chance percentage because this team was going to go nowhere without him. Now, they have a few goalies coming up in their system, which is why they moved on from him as they enter this next rebuild stage, and I feel like Jacob Markstrom is going to show the exact type of potential goalie that he is once he joins the New Jersey Devils next season. Now, Markstrom has put up some great numbers throughout the early stages of his careers, especially once he was in the latter days of his Vancouver Canucks seasons. I'm a big Jacob Markstrom guy, and I think he belongs on any top 10 list, so I have him as my number 10 goalie here. Next up, I have another guy who pretty much had matching numbers to Jacob Markstrom, and while he does show a lot of potential, I do feel like this year was a little bit of a step back for him based on his first couple of seasons. Jake Oettinger, the Otter himself playing with the Dallas Stars, averaged a .905 save percentage this year and a 2.72 goals against average with 35 wins in 54 games played this season. Now, it's not to say that I don't think that Jake Oettinger is going to be a top 5 goalie eventually in this league, and sometimes I feel like he even flirts with this status, but after this season, I am kind of left questioning whether or not Jake Oettinger is going to be enough for the Dallas Stars to ever really win a Stanley Cup. I do think the potential is insane with him. He's only 25, so there's definitely a ton of room for him to grow, but at this point, I can't really put him above some of the other guys on this list who have shown me way more throughout their careers than Jake Oettinger. Now, the one thing I will say about Otter is that he shows up big time in the playoffs. Just looking at this year, he played in 19 games, had 10 wins, a .915 save percentage, and a 2.24 goals against average. And you can even trace back these great numbers for when he played a couple years ago against the Calgary Flames, putting up a .945 save percentage and a 181 goals against average in that series. Otter is a great goalie, and I think that he's going to bounce back and keep climbing on this list. But with some of the other big names in the league right now, I just feel like I got to put Otter a little bit lower, but I do expect him to climb as we continue seeing his career grow. Coming in at number 8, I have a guy from Nashville who just got a massive extension in Juuse Saros. Now, if you look at his product of work, Juuse Saros has been one of the best goalies across the league for years now, but I still feel like there's a little bit more for him to accomplish before I'm going to put him in my top 5. Right now, since he became a starter with the Nashville Predators, he's never had a save percentage below .910 up until this year, so I feel like we really need to see him have a bounce back season for me to put him higher on this type of list. This season, he averaged a .906 save percentage with a 2.86 goals against average, 35 wins in 64 games, and let's not forget about that insane win streak he went on with the Nashville Predators to get them back in the playoffs. There's no knock on Juuse Saros for this list. It just shows you how many great goalies are still around in the league for me to leave him at number 8, but this is exactly where I think he belongs. I could be talked into raising him a little bit more, but I just like his current game and this position for him on my list. Coming in at number 7, a recent Stanley Cup champion and Vezina nominee, you guys might call call me crazy, but I think this is exactly where Sergei Bobrovsky belongs. This season, he put up some of his best career numbers, and for his age, it's pretty phenomenal to see. 35 years old, he has a .915 save percentage and a 2.37 goals against average, 36 wins in 58 games played. Now, Bobrovsky's being paid the big bucks, which is why we expect these phenomenal numbers from him. But I guess you could say he's been pretty inconsistent since joining the Florida Panthers, only really having 2 seasons where he's been that top-notch goalie, back when they won their first President's Trophy with Huberdeau in 2021-22, where he had a .913 save percentage, and then this year where he averaged that .915 save percentage. Let's not forget that Bobrovsky was basically benched for the playoffs last year to start in favor of Alex Lyon because he just couldn't find his game. I think that Sergei Bobrovsky is still a top goalie in this league, but I feel like with all of the other guys out there, number 7 is where he belongs. But if he comes up to put up a similar season like he did this year again, then he's definitely going to rise on my list. But right now, where his game is, I think that he's a solid number 7 on any top 10 list. Coming in at number 6, I have another Vezina guy. Call me crazy, but I feel like Thatcher Demko has earned himself the number 6 spot on any list. I actually considered putting him a little bit higher, but I'm going to explain why he's fallen a little bit for me. Number 1, injuries. I feel like Thatcher Demko has been injured a lot over the past couple of seasons, but if this guy can stay healthy, his numbers speak for themselves. Looking at his stats over his career, he averaged a .912 save percentage and a 2.79 goals against average, and this year in the playoffs, had he stayed healthy, I feel like his numbers could have been astronomical, especially when you compare them to his numbers back in 2019-2020, where he had a .985 save percentage and a .64 goals against average in just 4 games played. Now, I love Thatcher Demko, and I think this guy is going to be in Vezina conversations for many more years, and I think the Canucks are going to have a top 5 goalie for many more years if this guy can just stay healthy, because his size, his quickness, and his ability to move laterally is easily top-notch in the NHL. Coming in at number 5, I have Linus Ullmark, now the new Ottawa Senators starting goalie. You might be thinking to yourself, well, hasn't Ullmark really only been good since he joined the Boston Bruins? Well, not exactly. Let's just start by taking a look at his numbers over the past couple of years with Boston, and then we'll cross that with his Buffalo numbers. During his seasons with Boston, he averaged over a .915 save percentage in 3 years, starting out with a .917, then a whopping .938 in his Vezina winning year, and then finishing it off with a .915 save percentage before being moved to Ottawa. But his numbers in Buffalo were basically identical to his numbers in Boston. His last few seasons with the Sabres, he averaged a .905 save percentage, then a .915, and then finished it off with a .917 save percentage, never really being the true starter for the Buffalo Sabres, whether that was because they had too many goalies or just they didn't see the potential in Ullmark. Now, heading over to the Ottawa Senators, Ullmark is going to have his first real opportunity at being the number 1 starter for a team. Yes, he sort of was considered that with Boston, but whether you flirted with the idea of them having Tuukka Rask or Jeremy Swayman, it was never really clear who they thought of as their 1A. But this season, we're going to get to see a lot from Ullmark, and his career .919 save percentage and 251 goals against average is nothing to sneeze about. This guy is going to be incredible next season, I feel like, with Ottawa, and get them back into the playoffs. And let's not forget that this guy is only about a year removed from a Vezina winning season, so I think this guy deserves to be in any top 5, especially with this new opportunity he's been given. I think we're going to see a lot from him, and this is going to tell exactly what type of player he is based on how he works out with Ottawa. Coming in at number 4, this one would have been a hot take if I said this a year ago, but this year I think it feels a little bit more lukewarm, and that's Ilya Sorokin. Now, Sorokin had the worst numbers of his career. Comparatively to the other years that he played with the New York Islanders, this was actually a massive drop-off. If you take a look at his numbers with the Islanders, he started as a backup with a .918 save percentage, and then followed it up with 2 fantastic years, getting a .925 save percentage and then a .924 save percentage. But this year, the drop-off was actually pretty significant. A .909 save percentage is what he finished the year with a 3.01 goals against average, and the second half of this season was just god-awful for Sorokin. And if you take a look at his numbers from the playoffs, you'll be shocked. He had 1 game played, 6.61 goals against average, and a .786 save percentage. Not exactly Vezina caliber from a guy that everyone considered to be the number 1 goalie in the league just a year ago. Now, I'm not saying that Sorokin isn't capable of getting back up to that stature. I just feel like this season kind of showed showed us that he got paid, and maybe this is a turn in his career. I mean, he's 28 years old, so he's entering his prime, and if he can have a bounce back season, then yes, we should all consider him to be a top goalie again. But I do feel like this one season sort of showed us that he's vulnerable, and maybe guys figured him out in a sense. I want to see him bounce back. I'm a big fan of his game, but I just couldn't put him in the top 3 after this season, especially with some of the other performances we saw from the next 3 guys. Coming in at number 3, we have the guy who's finally taking on the number 1 role with the Boston Bruins, and that's Jeremy Swayman. Now, there was debate whether Boston should stick with Ullmark or if they should go with the younger option in Swayman, who's just only 25 years old. But after his stellar playoff performance, playing in 12 games with 6 wins, a .933 save percentage, and a 2.15 goals against average, I think that the decision was pretty clear for Boston. Now, taking a look at Swayman's numbers since he started playing with the Bruins, in his first year, he had a .945 save percentage, followed it up with a .914 save percentage, and then playing as a 1B option to Ullmark over the past 2 seasons, he averaged a .920 save percentage. These are fantastic numbers for such a young guy, especially in the playoffs. He's been absolutely phenomenal in clutch positions and has really showed Boston that he could be a top 3 goalie in the NHL. Now, some people might argue that he belongs a little bit lower on the list, but just given what we've seen from Swayman so far in his career, I feel like he's easily a top 3 guy right now. I think what really swayed me to put him here was definitely his playoff performance. I mean, this guy was phenomenal against the Maple Leafs and really stood on his head against the Florida Panthers, who ended up being the Stanley Cup champs this year. I think Swayman belongs perfectly in the top 3, and I think this guy's only going to get better and could potentially lead Boston to a sort of Tim Thomas-esque performance if he keeps up some of the numbers and performances he's already shown us. Coming in at number 2 is this year's Vezina winner, Connor Hellebuyck. Yeah, you guys might be surprised to see him any lower than number 1, but I think the big reason why I have to knock him down a little bit is his playoff performances over the past 2 years. Now, if you compare his past 2 playoff runs to 2020-2021, Hellebuyck has been very subpar. Last season, he had an .886 save percentage and a 3.44 goals against average, and this year he had an .870 save percentage with a 5.23 goals against average. Now, obviously, Hellebuyck has been one of the best regular season goalies of the past decade. I mean, just look at these numbers. He hasn't had a save percentage below .910 since the 2017-18 season, where he put up .924, .913, .922, .916, .910, .920, and then this year .921 for the Vezina season. I love Connor Hellebuyck, and I think he's easily one of the most consistent workhorses in the NHL when it comes to starting goalies, but I just don't think that he's number 1 for me at this point. There's one guy who has shown me a little bit more talent and just consistency throughout his career right now. So Connor Hellebuyck's going to land at number 2, but this one was very close to me, and I could be swayed one way or the other. And at number 1, this one should be no surprise to anybody who loves positioning and goalies. This is Igor Shesterkin's spot. This guy showed me this year that he is still the top goalie in the league, and the numbers that he puts up is just out of this world. Taking a look at his regular season numbers this year, he had a dicey first half to the season, but he really turned it around, finishing with a .913 save percentage, a 2.58 goals against average, with 36 wins in 55 games played. Looking back at his numbers, this guy has never had a save percentage average below .916, with .932, .916, .935, .916, and then .913. Igor Shesterkin's numbers don't end there because his playoff records are insane. Looking back at the past 3 seasons, in 2021-22, taking the Rangers to the conference finals, he averaged a .929 save percentage and a 2.59 goals against average. Last season, when they were knocked out in the first round to the Devils, he was most certainly not to blame. A .931 save percentage and a 1.96 goals against average. And then this year in the playoffs, playing in 16 games with 10 wins, he had a .927 save percentage and a 2.34 goals against average. You can't really blame Igor Shesterkin for the faults of the New York Rangers. Their defense is solid, but it's not the best, and he's still showing up and showing out in every single playoff series, which I think is a little bit more valuable than what Connor Hellebuyck does in the playoffs versus the regular season. It's not like Igor Shesterkin's a bad regular season goalie and Connor Hellebuck's great and then they just flip roles in the playoffs. I think Igor Shesterkin is just the most consistent guy league-wide, and I think most people would probably agree with me on this one. Last season, it was up between Sorokin and Shesterkin, and I think Shesterkin showed us that he's more consistent while Sorokin had a bit of a down year. This is why I have Igor Shesterkin at number 1. His regular season numbers, the consistency in the playoffs, and just his ability to be the best player on any team puts him in this slot for me over guys like Hellebuyck, Sorokin, and Swayman. But let me know what you guys think about my list. These are my top 10 NHL goalies heading into the 2024-25 season. Comment who you think needs to be moved around, who should be higher, who should be lower, or if maybe I missed somebody outside of my top 10 that belongs here. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one.